did you ever notice when you were watching a movie or television and they showed a phone number, that phone number would always begin 555? Sure, this was a number that was not valid for use in the phone numbering system in the United States. So this is why we would always see 555. How convenient. And this reminds me of our RFC 1918 private IP address space. That's right, what an amazingly powerful band-aid to the IP address shortage. The idea is this: if we can go ahead and set aside IP addresses that are only valid inside corporations or inside our homes, we can save on IP addresses dramatically. That's exactly what happens with this private IP address space. So the first address space that I want you to memorize is the Class A private address space. Notice this one's real easy to memorize. We call it the 10.x space. That's right, if the IP address begins with the number 10, that's it. It is private IP address space, and it cannot be publicly routable on the internet. We can use it all that we want inside our private homes or corporations, but this particular number won't be usable on the public internet, as we stated. So what a great, great band-aid for address shortages. Now, wait a minute. If we have a bunch of machines inside our corporation and they're all in this 10.x address space, how do they communicate on the public internet? And as you know, this is the job of network address translation. Network address translation is going to convert or translate these private-only IP addresses into publicly routable IP addresses. What's the next range of private IP addresses? Well, in the Class B space, we have from 172.16.00 to 172.31.255.255. Notice a bit trickier to memorize those particular Class B addresses that are in the private space. We know we have to memorize they start at 172.16 and they go up to 172.31.255.255. I would highly recommend that you consider making flashcards with these private IP addresses so that when you have to pick them out of a lineup, like in the CCNA certification exam, you have no issues with that. And by the way, these are tested also at the CCENT level. Well, our final space, the Class C space, 192.168.00 to 192.168.255.255. Again, it would be a real good idea to put these addresses on flashcards so we can easily memorize all of these A, B, and C address ranges that are private use only, like that 555 number we saw for our friends, the Ghostbusters. Now, let's prove this whole concept, by the way. I am right now in a private home-based network, so let's go up and take a look at my IP addressing that's in use. Here I am at the Windows command prompt, also known as the dark place, famously, and I'm going to go ahead and run the ipconfig command. The ipconfig command is going to show me the IP address information on my local area connection. And sure enough, look at this. My IP address is indeed 192.168.17. And if we remember back to our private IP address space, sure enough, this falls in that Class C private IP address space, that 192.168, in this case 17, right in that private range. As a matter of fact, this is a range that is used by a lot of small office, home office router equipment, like Cisco's own Linksys wireless routers, for example. So we can see, yes, we're not only in the private IP address space, but we are indeed in that private IP address space that is reserved for these home-based small office, home office Cisco devices. So folks, I hope you've enjoyed this look at the RFC 1918 private IP addresses. And by the way, that RFC 1918 reference that we use, that's the original standard that defined these particular private IP addresses. If you do a Google search on RFC 1918, you can go ahead and look at the original standards documentation for this particular Band-Aid to the IPv4 address shortage.